discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
Hi everyone, I'm Barbara Ham Lee, and this is Another View. It's been 6 weeks since Dr. Henry Louis Gates was arrested at his Cambridge, Massachusetts home by Sergeant James Crowley, an incident that caused another painful discussion about race in America. Now, many in this country thought that with the election of a black president, racial issues had finally gone away. But the Gates-Crowley incident sparked a national debate that indicates we still have a long way to go. Joining us to talk about race, particularly when it comes to interaction with law enforcement, is Norfolk Police Chief Bruce Marquis, commentator and concerned citizen Bill Thomas, and Dr. Jerrold Roy, Assistant Professor of History at Hampton University. Welcome to the program, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, let me say from the outset that I spoke with several Caucasian people who I thought would make good conversation and join us in this discussion. And while they had lots to say to me on the phone, nobody wanted to come on TV and to talk about it. So my question is, how can we have a great conversation about race if we can't come together and talk about it face to face? Let me start with you, Dr. Roy.
That's a great question, and unfortunately a lot of folks want to pay lip service to this idea of this racial harmony that supposedly was created after President Obama was elected, but those of us that are in the real world understand that that's actually not realistic. You would think in an academic environment that more individuals would be willing to have these kinds of discussions, but unfortunately, even at an institution like Harvard, it's difficult for those discussions to take place. I was actually a student at the Graduate School of Education at Harvard, and I initiated many discussions about race in many of my classes, and that's really the only way that those kinds of discussions are going to get initiated, if we take the mantle and spearhead those kinds of conversations.
Bill, did you think once President Obama got into office that all of a sudden there were no race problems?
Absolutely not. My mom had a saying to us, and she told all of her children, that you were born black and you're going to die black. And when you start thinking differently is when you're going to start seeing the world as it not really is. I don't see this much as an issue other than a privileged, bougie black man who thought he was half white and married a white woman for 20 years from Harvard, and my sister graduated from Harvard, just an elitist who thought that he was better than the rest of us. And he got put in his place. So I think it's a reality check for him to understand that race is an issue, but race and arrogance, which I thought he did, is even a worse issue.
So you think it was he brought it on himself?
Oh, absolutely. I think he brought it on for two reasons. As he said in his interview, he's half white. You know, he's black when he needs to be black. He's not.
We're talking about Gates here, not Obama.
I'm talking about Gates.
Okay.
The issue of Obama is, I don't see Obama as a African American or a Native American or a Hawaiian American. I see him as American. I think that's what we need to see more of. And quite frankly, I'm not shocked that white folks are afraid to speak up what they'll hold deep in their hearts and in their community. They need to come out and say something. In fact, they're being suckered by, as far as I'm concerned, by people like Gates, who uses race as an anvil to get things that he doesn't deserve, as far as I can see it.
What do you think?
Well, very interesting. I do think we need to, at some point, if we're ever capable of doing so, move beyond the race issue and get back to the human being issue. I would agree with Mr. Thomas in that regard. It's unfortunate that we're still stuck on the race issue. It's still unfortunate that many of our prejudices and biases come out depending on what the situation is. You know, in this case, it happens to be a black-white issue. It could be a gay versus non-gay issue. It could be an issue over religion or one's choice of religion. It could be a lot of things. But I think what we fail to do is to look at each other as human beings and fail to look at the character of the person in front of us. And
what is it about race that just drives people to such polarizing places? I mean, I listen to conversation that we've had, you know, within groups, within interracial groups, within all black groups, you know, and it is just such a dividing thing. How do we get past that, or can we? Is it realistic to think we can get past it?
Well, I think race is one of those polarizing issues, as has been stated, but I don't think race is the only polarizing issue. I think politics is polarizing. I think religion is polarizing. I think one's Sexual preference is another polarizing issue. Again, I think it goes back to the human being and our biases and prejudices. I don't think we're ever going to get beyond it. I think the road will be made smoother as time goes on, as we see more mixed marriages and those sort of situations in terms of the race issue. But I don't think we're ever going to get beyond it because people come with some preconceived notions, whether that comes from the home environment or the friends that you hang around with or whatever. I don't think we're ever going to get totally beyond it.
From a law enforcement perspective, since this did involve law enforcement, what was your stand on what happened? I know there are two different versions, so I guess first of all, from the police perspective, did Sergeant Crowley follow procedure? Do you think he went overboard? Just your personal opinion.
Well, it won't be my personal opinion; it'll be my professional opinion.
Okay.
Obviously, I read the police incident report, and a lot of it was blotted out, and I do have an opinion about it. I will go back to some of the things that Mr. Thomas said with regard to Mr. Gates. I think Mr. Gates was certainly one of the two people who was at fault here. Okay, I think Sergeant Thomas was also at fault from a professional point of view. He's
Sergeant Crowley, yeah.
Sergeant. I'm sorry. Yes, he's a professional law enforcement person, and not only that, he's a supervisor, and he should have handled that situation much better. And I think both of them came to loggerheads, and neither one of them knew how to back out of it. And unfortunately, Sergeant Crowley had the law on his side, and he made an arrest that didn't have to take place. I think while the matter may have been exacerbated by Mr. Gates, I don't think the sergeant did anything to alleviate that. Matter of fact, I think he in turn continued to exacerbate a situation.
Dr. Roy, what did you think about the whole incident?
Well, one of the things that I learned at a very young age growing up in Chicago is that when you're stopped by the police are in charge, they're in control, they're in power. So regardless of what you might think or feel about the police, there's a certain way that you have to respond to them. And if you don't respond in that manner, then you can exacerbate the situation and you can end up getting arrested. And I think, as the chief said, that Professor Gates took it a little further than he needed to. If he thought that he was being treated unfairly, the best thing that he could have done would have been to adhere to whatever the officer was telling him, taking his badge number down, and then if he wanted to file charges against him after the fact. I think that would have been the best way to handle the situation, but sometimes emotions get the best of you under those circumstances, and you think just because you're Henry Louis Gates, the head of the dream team at Harvard University, that everybody knows who you are and that, you know, you're supposed to be treated differently. But then you also have to look at it from the perspective of the police officer and the fact that their lives are constantly in danger and they don't know who's likely to pull out a gun on them or who's likely to react violently towards them. So they have to act aggressively in many instances, and sometimes maybe they take it a step further. I think in this particular instance, the officer did take it a little too far. He could have walked away. The woman that called was simply trying to look out for her neighbors. She didn't indicate that the people were black, but that somebody was trying to break into somebody's house. My question was, doesn't she know who her neighbors are? But that's a whole nother issue. But, you know, you want neighbors like that are looking out for you. So, you know, you can't fault the neighbor. Really, it boils down to how the two gentlemen handled the situation, and both of them could have taken a step back and resolved the situation without it reaching the point that it did.
Bill, do you think the Beer Summit helped?
I think when our police officers go on the line and our community, which is really a good God-fearing, police-believing community, we were brought up that way. We were taught to be respectful. I think the Beer Summit was an absolute waste of time. It took President Obama off his message on the medical issue that he was trying to do. I think it's more about arrogance. And you have a poor white farmer down in Briscoe, Virginia, who haven't had the privilege that Mr. Gates has had, that just a God blessing. The one thing that we were always taught before we were integrated into the mainstream community was to obey authorities, obey God, obey elders, and we've lost that. And I just think when you look to see how much reflection we put on here, at the end of the day, these dream professors, including Mr. Gates, who is Professor Gates, who is an outstanding citizen. I guess he got the first African-American doctorate from Cambridge University in England. But what he's doing is teaching a bunch of privileged white kids about African-American history. He's lost reality of the world. The world tells me that since 1972, when the FBI started keeping statistics, 252,000 black men have died on America's streets. In the Washington Post the other day, they were saying that 1 or 2 officers are killed each and every other day trying to protect us against crime and drugs. So I just think this was totally blown out of protection. It isn't a race issue. It's just an issue.
So you think Henry Gates made it a race issue?
It's an issue of arrogance. It's an issue of a man who would get on television and insult every African-American woman in the world that I can think of to say that he thought he was different because he was married to a white woman and divorced for 20 years. I think it's the epitome of arrogance. And I think white folks ought to get up and talk about this and talk about it publicly and stop sitting around being chumps and not dealing with this. There's people on the street that need help. The officers need help in terms of educating and outreaching to our kids in our communities, and we're not doing that. And to spend a moment of issue with this, to me, is a shame. But it does need to be discussed.
But the fact that it did go so national and the fact that President Obama did step in made it a national issue. So he had to deal with it, right?
But he was wrong.
He was wrong in the way in dealing with it, or in what he said?
In dealing with it, period, without the facts. And then number 2, dealing with another arrogant African-American bourgeoisie folk that don't understand who they are, where they came from, or the little thing my mama said, you're born black and you're going to die black. Never forget that.
Do you think that the president should have gotten in the middle of it?
I think the president felt obligated to make a statement in regards to what was going on because Henry Louis Gates was a friend of his. I think he regrets the fact that he said that the officer acted stupidly. Maybe if he had said both gentlemen acted stupidly, which was a more accurate statement because they both did. I think he felt the need to say something, but it did take him off point. It did take him off his message, and I think he may have some regret that happened as a result. But I mean, I think that he is a lot closer to being someone who understands what it is to be an African American that a lot of people give him credit for on the streets of Chicago, South Side, as a community organizer. Excuse me. I think he had the opportunity to see firsthand what it's like to be an African American. He may not have had that experience growing up, but I think he's had more than enough experiences, and even being married to a woman like Michelle Obama. I think he has is no doubt that he knows who he is and where he's from.
And he was kind of reacting from the heart a little bit in that press conference.
Exactly.
Chief Marquis, have you ever been profiled?
Yes.
And now you're in law enforcement and you've been profiled.
Yes.
So talk to me about how that made you feel, and you know, what do you teach your officers?
Well, I was angered when it happened. It happened right here on Highway 64 one morning when I was going for a medical examination and driving a city vehicle, and I knew the motorcycle officer, not of my department.
Oh, I was
not
going to say
of my department.
Okay.
And I won't mention the department, but not of my department. Certainly did take actions in my estimation. He was profiling, there's no doubt about it. And then he did pull me over because, as he said, he was uncertain as to who was driving the car or what the car was about. It's an SUV. It was black at the time, and the windows are darkened out. And but he certainly did profile me. And then once I explained to him who I was, then he wasn't very courteous or professional after that. So absolutely, and I felt angered, and I did think about going to the head of that particular agency, but I didn't. I kind of let it go. But there's no doubt that I was profiled. Absolutely.
You have sons.
Yes, I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son.
Okay.
Yes.
What do you teach your children about how to deal with the police? And here's the reason why I asked this question. One of the discussions that came out of this was, you know, our young people today seem to have much more of an interracial dealings in terms of their friends. Right. You know, they're much more multiracial than we were growing up. But yet their parents are still saying to them, you're still a black boy. You know, here's what you need to watch out for. Is that what you say to your sons?
Absolutely. I agree with these gentlemen here with regard to the advice they were given when they were growing up. I was given the same advice. My mother's from Shreveport, Louisiana, so the deep south, and even though was born and raised in California, you know, once you're black, you're always black, as Mr. Thomas says. You know, you're born black, you're going to die black, and so absolutely, my son is starting to drive now. He has his learner's permit, and pretty soon he'll have his own license, and he'll be out there by himself. And should he ever get stopped by the police, whether it's mine or someone else's, he needs to, as Dr. Roy said, learn to be respectful to the police. And there's other things that I'll tell him how he should act inside the car, not just be respectful in terms of how he verbally communicates, but how he should act also. In other words, keep your hands on the steering wheel, for instance, and you know, don't make any quick or furtive movements. You know, roll down the window, just follow all the directions that the officer tells you, and again, just be respectful.
Do you think white people have to have the same conversation with their kids?
No.
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 Not at all.
No, absolutely not.
And I don't think that the white police officers treat white motorists that may be belligerent with them in the same manner that they would treat a black motorist that might be belligerent.
So let me ask you this: and if Henry Louis Gates had been a white guy, do you think that it would have gone as far as an arrest?
In my department, yeah, probably, yes.
Okay, so it was the fact that he was disrespectful, period.
Yes, absolutely. However, I won't disagree with Dr. Roy, but I think had it been a white male behaving the same way, that the end result would have pretty much been the same. Yes.
Knowing the Cambridge police as I do, having been a resident up there for 4 years, I would think that the white professor would not have been arrested. There might have been the similar tete-a-tete between the two, but I think the officer would have walked away and warned the professor to watch his tone or something.
Chief Marquis, he called for backup. Now, I mean, when you look at Henry Louis Gates, he's not a very threatening-looking individual. I mean, I just look at all of that kind of in its totality, and I understand, having worked in law enforcement myself, you know, that there is that level of protection that you must take for yourself. But you don't think that was over the top?
Well, let me go back to my opening statement, or my initial statement. I think both gentlemen acted out of character. I think both made a bad situation worse. And from the law enforcement standpoint, I think the sergeant's wrong. I'm not saying that Mr. Gates is not wrong. He clearly instigated this, was the instigator in this situation. But the sergeant should have behaved better, should have acted professionally. He could have taken steps to alleviate this situation, to calm it down. He didn't, and I don't know why he would have called for backup. It would seem like overkill to me. But again, we're looking at this second and third hand. Right.
And that's very true. Bill?
I'm just saying that, of course, you would have expected that to happen. I don't think that's any different than in Newport News or Norfolk or any place. We see every day the images of black people killing each other on TV consistently. Nothing good about Hampton University, or nothing good about Norfolk State.
Except on Another View.
But consistently, and you're bringing it until you get here.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is we consistently see that. There's a mom who killed her son just the other day in Virginia Beach, and it's all over the paper. We talk about 252,000 black people in the past 20 years that have killed each other, more than the population of the city of Hampton and Portsmouth combined. Or, you know, and then we don't do anything. But the first time we step out of line, or especially the ones that have been privileged, then they're going to say it's the white man. No, it isn't. We have to go back, in my opinion, and find out what is the root cause of all this happening. And the root cause is that Mr. Gates and all these other folks, and maybe even the Bill Thomases, should go back to their communities, do some good work, do some things, because I never heard him talk about that. I just heard him talk about his white wife and his half-white children. The man has a problem. Beyond that, but to tell the community and the white community out there as well, which are very vocal outside the doors, that we're not like that. We are God-fearing, police-supporting, military-supporting people, and we don't act like this. And for this man in his privileged position to set out that kind of example is just a bad thing. If the police would have come knocked on my door, I would have said two things going to happen. I'm going to act respectful, or I'm going to jail.
One or the other. We only have a very few minutes left. How do we continue, and I'll start with you, Dr. Roy, the conversation? Or should we continue the conversation? Or should we just let race kind of go away as we intermingle as
No,
with interracial couples.
The conversation definitely has to continue. I think one thing that needs to be examined is the fact that this officer is supposedly training other officers for racial sensitivity, and I think somebody needs to examine exactly what's going on in that particular class that he's teaching. But I think we need to have a dialogue, and we need to continue to engage others that think that we have reached a point, a pinnacle, or a point where race is no longer an issue. We need to encourage other individuals to get on a show like this and to express their view. One of the things that I found when I had these conversations is that many whites were intimidated or afraid or didn't know exactly how to express themselves without coming across as being racist, and that's their fear. They don't want to come across as being racist. And that's what
most of the people told me who were invited to come on the show, that they didn't want to come across as being racist. But, you know, and I know we only have about a minute left, but it's just very frustrating to me as you read in the papers and you see all the blogs and so forth, and there's all this anonymity, but yet nobody's willing, not nobody, but very few people are willing to come forward and just have an open and honest discussion about it.
Well, I think we need to move beyond the discussion. We've been talking about this. We've been talking about this for too long. I'm 57 years old, and we've been talking about this going way back into the 50s, into the early 60s with the civil rights movement. And we're in the same situation if we're as a race, or not worse situation than we were then. There's too many young black men going to jail. There's too many young black men dying on the streets at the hand of other young black men. Okay, black on black crime is just skyrocketing, and there's more black men in jail than going to college. And we have to move beyond the discussion. We've been talking about this for 40 years. We have got to change our ways. We're never going to get beyond this point. And
unfortunately, we're out of time. And you know what, though? We're going to have to continue more about this conversation and talk more about the solutions moving forward. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
And our thanks to Chief Bruce Marquis. Hello, Bill Thomas, and Dr. Jerrold Roy. And when we come back, a look at law enforcement from a different perspective. But first, here's what's happening in Hampton Roads. Welcome back, everyone. The organization is called NOBLE, National Organization for Black Law Enforcement Executives. Recently, NOBLE held its annual conference in Norfolk, and Lisa Godley shows us a special part of the conference, the March and Memorial Service, the event designed to recognize, remember, and inspire.
Scores of Norfolk residents recently lined the streets of downtown to witness something most had never seen before. A parade consisting solely of black law enforcement officers.
We try to march in those communities that may not have seen a minority executive in their life, and it gives them hope.
There you go, young man.
Thank you. Hundreds of officers from all over the country make up the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, or NOBLE. And this year, they held their annual training conference in Norfolk. One of NOBLE's traditions is to participate in a march and memorial service to honor deceased members of the group who've died during the past year.
These were men that have stood in the doorway of harm's way and were willing to protect their communities. Dr. Willie B. Clayton Jr., Inspector Retired, Atlantic City, New Jersey Police Department, South Jersey Chapter, Region 1, NOBLE founding member.
But the service held at the First Baptist Church, Butte Street, did more than remember fallen comrades. It was also the time to encourage and celebrate the living.
The future's looking bright for you.
If you can go forth with a
mentality of service, then I will be all right and the world will be all right, because I heard from you that the world will be all right because Officer so-and-so is all right.
I hope they listen to Dr. Murray, the words of Dr. Murray, and realize that through them, a lot of changes can be made in our community.
The men and women who make up Noble believe that part of that change begins with our youth. They invited young people from the Norfolk community to participate in the conference and learn what law enforcement executives do by becoming Noble youth. Scores of children from our area took part, marching in the parade and packing the balcony at First Baptist Church during the memorial service. Noble members not only share their time with young people during the conference, but their money as well, by awarding scholarships to 2 children from the Norfolk community to help further their education. After all, they are the future, and any one of them could be the next inspector, sheriff, or chief of police. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godlin.
Now, despite a little bit of controversy around the conference here in Norfolk, the Noble Conference brought more than 1,200 officers and their families to the Hampton Roads area and an estimated $2.5 million to the city of Norfolk. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Another View. Be sure to visit our website, anotherview.tv, for updates on this and other show topics. You can also send us a note or write us via regular mail at 5200 Hampton Boulevard, Norfolk. Next week, your money, how to save it, when to spend it, and how to make it work for you. We'll see you next time for Another View.